When we're talking about infidelity and rebuilding, where should we start this conversation, Joe?
Yeah, great question. I work with couples week in, week out on this exact subject. And those with a faith, they really struggle with the concept or kind of giving themselves permission to leave. They really battle that one. Is it okay for me to not stay in this relationship? And I just want to be first to say it is okay. You are allowed to leave. The covenant, the sacred vows, those have been broken. And this is the moment that you can actually really confront that question is, am I prepared to stay in this? Many, many couples stay, like many couples survive this. So there's heaps and heaps of hope. But you need to see what I call some green flags in order to know whether it's a relationship you can stay for.
Okay, this is good. This is positive. So let's say you've decided, we want to work through this. We want to try and aim for reconciliation and healing. What are these green flags that indicate that this is possible, that the trust can be repaired?
Yeah, so the first one is ownership. You really need to hear from the other person, the one who's done the betraying. And I use that word specifically because betrayal is more than just a sexual relationship, like it's many, many things. So you need to see and hear ownership, that the person's saying, I did this, it wasn't okay, and I'm deeply sorry. So really that kind of posture of humility and deep, I always think like someone should be groveling at this point. Like you should really feel their desperation. I'm like, great green flag if someone's crying while they're apologizing. Excellent. The second thing is that that person needs accountability. So they need to tell a friend or tell a therapist. Actually, I'm going to say that they have to tell a therapist and tell a friend. And then they need to know that it's going to look different for a while. Like your relationship is not going to look the way that it did. And you know what? It's actually going to be like that for about 2 years. And they need to be up for the work.
Wow. I'm trying to think, when you're talking about this idea of how to know it's a green flag, it's probably fair we do talk about the red flag then. What is one of those signs that tells us, well, maybe this is a relationship I walk away from?
Yeah, immediately when someone starts blaming the other person, I go red flag, red flag, red flag. This is because you did X or you did Y or you didn't do enough of this for me, or, really trying to shift blame or doing what we call gaslighting, which is making the other person feel a bit crazy. So, no, I didn't do that. Or you're imagining that never happened. And you start to go into this mode of, what's true and what's not, like I've lost everything. So those are big red flags for me, and really watch out for those.
What about when in a situation where the person is sorry, but they don't actually say that they're sorry?
Oh, that's great. Sorry to jump in. I think that's a great question.
That's not okay. Somebody needs to say it. They have to say they're sorry, and they actually have to say it almost every single day. They shouldn't go 2 days without apologizing. And this is what I mean about somebody willing to do the work. Like they have to show up, and it's hard. It's really challenging.
And I remember reading around just apologies in general a little while ago. And one of the things I observed was that often in an apology, the big thing that's missing is the actual apology.
Yeah.
So it's something like, hey, I'm sorry for how you feel, and I'm sorry that I hurt you, and I'm sorry that I've done this to our house. But they don't actually say, I'm sorry that I betrayed you, that I slept with someone else that I was not married to. Like, that's the apology. That's the actual thing that has happened, as opposed to this more kind of peripheral language that people often use to avoid directly owning what they've done.
So true. And you've brought up a really good kind of point there, which is about owning the specific behaviors. So often the person who's being betrayed has a lot of questions, and they are entitled to the answers of those questions. So another red flag for me is when somebody wants to control the story and they only want to share certain parts of it, and they don't really want to disclose. I mean, of course you don't want to, that's not a fun experience, but the partner is entitled to the information because it's their life and they have to know what they're staying for.
It sounds very tricky, and I imagine that you really do need someone to coach and guide the process, like have a therapist there to help you deal with these processes strategically, because it looks and sounds painful, and I can't begin to imagine what this is like for people who've walked through this specific scenario. But I imagine too that there are worms that will come out of the woodwork. Like there are probably behaviors and patterns from families of origin that have kind of come in here, and there's actually underlying perhaps communication dysfunctions as well that need to be addressed.
Absolutely. It always brings up the whole history, and we dive pretty quickly into childhood.
Mm.
So often betrayal isn't about intimacy, or I'm using kind of vague language there. It's not about physical intimacy. It's often about what's happening for the person. Do they feel stressed? Do they feel abandoned? Do they feel, is their ego wounded? Are they feeling kind of like really bad about themselves? Are they depressed? That's the stuff we really need to hit, because that's what, if we deal with that, they're unlikely to do that behavior again.
Mm. And something that strikes me as well, I'm trying to think of the most, I don't know, fair way to deal with this. So feel free to steer the ship in the right direction. When we are talking about this too, although the behavior is never excused, we don't say that it's all right in any circumstances to cheat on somebody. Often the behaviors between both parties are unacceptable. You might have, even though, the party that was cheated on, maybe they're verbally abusive, for example, or maybe they are controlling, or maybe they're whatever. So how do you kind of reconcile with those things where there may well be negative behavior on the part of the person who has been betrayed? We don't want to hang this whole thing on them, but at the same time, everybody's got stuff they've got to work through. I don't know if I've made any sense of that, but can you decipher where I'm getting at?
Absolutely. Yeah, and this is why you have to talk to somebody who's specialized in the field, not just a general relationship therapist, because they often want to dive really quickly into the relationship dynamics. So they want to go into, they want to talk about intimacy, or they want to talk about communication really quickly. And the relationship is not ready for that. So there are some ground rules, like you aren't allowed to ever hit someone. You are never allowed to verbally abuse them. Throwing things isn't acceptable. So we create ground rules, of course, but you have to build trust in order to be vulnerable enough to talk about the relationship. So that is not phase one. Phase one is rebuilding trust. And I'm going to say phase two, phase three, we start to integrate more relationship kind of groundwork. And that's, of course, that's going to take you really far. But nobody can talk about their negative behaviors when they feel violated. And that's actually what they feel, is often physically violated. They describe feeling sick. They describe losing their appetite, having nightmares, PTSD symptoms. So that's not the time to go back and forth on who did things wrong in the relationship.
Jo, how do you think having a Christian faith helps people navigate the situation?
What I see is when this happens to couples, I see that those with a faith are really quite determined to try and reconcile, and almost to a fault. So they stay through continuous traumatic behaviors, and they're kind of like really, really challenged in the staying leaving part. And those without a faith do tend to be a little bit quicker to make that decision. So I love that, and I struggle with it at the same time. I love the commitment there, but I also think particularly women in faith circles really struggle to give themselves permission to have boundaries. And they've often been taught from a very early age to just be nice and not make anyone uncomfortable. And that's a problem.
It makes me think about the lack of consequence. And so if I put this in my own words, that if somebody knows no matter what I do to you, you will always stay, then suddenly it can open the door, whether somebody starts off deliberately trying to take advantage of this or otherwise. If I know there's no chance that I could ever, lose this relationship, as opposed to knowing at some point you might say, that's it, I'm not going to take this from you any longer. You kind of need to know you're with someone who could walk away if they wanted to, but chooses not to, as opposed to being with somebody who will never and can never walk away because of some unhealthy thinking they have around themselves or relationships.
Absolutely. I don't actually love in people's vows when they say, I will always put you first, because it's can create a slightly abusive dynamic where one person's consent even is not part of the equation. So they put themselves second in every single area. Now, of course, I love it when my husband Dave makes me a cup of tea when he really wants to go to bed. Like, that's a beautiful thing. That's putting me first.
Yeah.
And that's great. But when it comes to our intimate relationship, like intimacy, when it comes to, these really big, hard things that happen in relationships that are traumatizing, putting the other person first isn't necessarily the best for the relationship or for you.
Yeah, that's so true. And Joe, I just want to ask, with relation to this whole Andy Byron situation, what do you think this is teaching us about how we talk about relationships and how we deal with things publicly?
Yeah, I had so much pain for this whole situation as soon as I saw it. And, everybody laughed, and I get that. I'm not trying to minimize also the humor of someone ducking at a, at a concert. But I really, really was devastated for the fact that there was this public commentary on someone's relationship.
Yeah.
And this is happening all around us. This will be happening in your friend group. It will be happening in your family. It will be happening in your church community, in your workplace. And you just don't know about it because nobody tells you. Like, they might tell one singular person or literally no one at all. And so when you're talking about relationships and particularly infidelity, just be really kind with your words. Everybody says to me, "Oh, I would leave immediately if that happened to me." You actually wouldn't. Most people don't. And you don't know what you will do until you're in the moment.
Yeah.
So let's just be kind, less public commentary of people's situation.
Amazing. I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did.
Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn your notifications on so you don't miss the next video.
We'll see you in the next one.